Okay, guys, I posted a message on Google Classroom that kind of details what we're, hopefully how this class is going to go. Um, I also talked to Miss Emberton. Some of you had emailed me about picking up your binder, bringing in gloves and potty pads for your bonus points for your first 9 weeks grade. And she said that it would be okay for you to come up here to the high school and pick up your binder if you want that. You probably will want that at least for to finish up this unit that we're on right now that we'll be finishing up this week. Um, and then also if you want to bring gloves or potty pads to add bonus points to your second 9 weeks grade, you can do that. You can bring those. You can come by and get your binder and bring those gloves and potty pads, whichever you want to bring. If you want to bring them at all, you don't have to. Uh, Monday and Tuesday of this week, March 16th and 17th, between about 8 and 2. If you come after 2, there's a good chance that I won't be there. So if you want to bring me anything or pick up anything, you need to be here before 2. Also, I have posted a survey on Google Classroom. Number 1, asking you if you would like paper copies. I know, some of you might like. I'm going to post everything, all the materials for our unit on Google Classroom. As far as PowerPoint, handouts, and things like that. But I know sometimes, especially if you're trying to work from a device like a phone or an iPad mini or something, it might be a little bit difficult to see the stuff. It might also be difficult to type in answers and things. So if you have a paper copy, it would be easier for you to see. Also, you can write your answers to things on there and on them, and then you could take a picture of it and send it back to me, I guess, for some assignments. Also, you may or may not have a printer at home to actually print out the things so that you can see them better. So if you would like, on that survey, please complete that survey for me and tell me whether or not you would like paper copies. Again, it will be the same copies that I was giving you in class, except that I don't normally give you copies of the PowerPoint, but if you would like to have paper copies of the PowerPoint, I can do that. And then copies of the handouts as well. Now, I won't be sending copies of the Google Forms that I make. You will have to do those on Google Classroom and submit them. And I won't be sending copies of the test. That will also be on Google Classroom, and you'll need to do it on Google Classroom. The only exception to that would be someone who doesn't have internet. Someone who doesn't have internet, I will send them paper copies of the Google Forms as well as the exams and things like that we do. So, but otherwise, as long as you have internet access, the only thing I would send you as far as paper copies would be PowerPoints and then handouts for the unit. The other thing on Google Classroom, on that survey that I have on Google Classroom, is asking you whether you would rather do a video lectures like what I'm doing right now, or whether you would like to do like a live, real-time lecture. If we wanted to do something live, real time, we would do that on something like Google Meet, and we would all, we would have to schedule a date and a time that we would all get online together, and then I could go over things here on my computer, and you guys would be able to see the PowerPoint. You'd be able to listen to what I'm saying. So if that's something that you are interested in, you can complete the survey and tell me that. The reason that I'm choosing to do the video lectures is because you can, pretty much watch the video, play the video whenever you have time to do that. Also, you can pause it, you can go rewind it, you can listen, you can do it more than once. With a live lecture, you would not be able to do those things, but with a video, you can listen to it more than one time, you can pause it, you can rewind it and go back and listen to a part again if you wanted to, so it's a little bit more flexible for you. I won't be able to do both because that would take a long time to sit and do a lecture for around an hour and then do another hour of a video for those that didn't want to do the live lecture. So if we did the live lecture, we would have to have everyone to agree to come together at a certain date and time to do those, and that's all you would have, and there would not be a video or anything. The only thing you would have besides the time you spend in that lecture would be the PowerPoint to look at. So again, that's up to you. You can just fill out the survey and let me know which you would rather do. But until then we will be doing the video lectures. Also, what I'm going to do is I will do the video lectures, and then I will give you questions to answer after the video over things that were covered in the video. I also may do Google Forms for quizzes. Also, exams, any exams that we do will be on a Google Form. And so I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of how the class was going to go. Again, I will, just like I always do, be posting all the materials for the class as far as the PowerPoint and the handouts on Google Classroom. And then you can look at those on there. You can print those out at home if you need to, or again, on that survey, you can indicate if you would like me to print those out for you and send them to you. We don't exactly have a delivery schedule yet of how we would get those to you beyond, you could come up here and pick them up from me, come up to the high school and get them, or we will be having school people going out into the county to deliver things to students and pick up work from students for those that don't have internet, so we might be able to get them delivered that way too. But if you do want the paper copies, I will be letting you know, hopefully tomorrow, exactly how we need to do that, as far as whether you just need to come in and get them from me, or someone will bring them to you or meet you somewhere to give them to you. I'll try to find out more information about that and hopefully get in touch with you somehow tomorrow. So I also have posted lesson plans. We are going to be going according to those lesson plans this week roughly. If we go by those lesson plans, then we will have an exam over muscle contraction over this entire unit. We'll be finishing it up today, Tuesday and Wednesday, and having an exam on Thursday, which would be, again, on a Google Form on Google Classroom. So the video that we're going to go over right now is going to be a video where we're going to finish the PowerPoint for this unit, also do some review over some of the stuff that we've talked about. Make sure you understand the things that are going to be on the exam, and then you will have the exam on Thursday. And then on Friday, there will be another short video kind of getting us started on what we're going to be looking at next. So I remember last Wednesday we talked about things that can affect the amount of tension in a muscle because there is no partial contraction. It's either on or off, contracted or relaxed. So we control the amount of tension in the muscle by how often or how frequently we stimulate the muscle fiber, as well as the number of fibers that we stimulate. And in this video we watched in class, I can't show this on a video because I do upload this video to YouTube, and this is a copyrighted video. So if I show this video on my video, then I get in trouble for copyright infringement. So again, this is on the PowerPoint that's posted on Google Classroom. If you want to go back and watch that video, just go to that slide on my PowerPoint on Google Classroom and click on it, and you can watch that video. So you guys last Wednesday drew this graph. Again, just to review, a twitch is a single cycle of contract and relax. You don't get anything useful done with a twitch. A twitch does have three phases: the latent or lag period, the contraction, and then the relaxation. Again, the latent and lag period is where the action potential arrives in the muscle cell, goes down the T-tubules to the to the sarcoplasmic reticulum, causing the calcium to be released. The calcium binds to troponin. Troponin pulls the tropomyosin away so that the myosin heads or cross bridges can attach to the actin, pull the actin toward the center of the sarcomere, sliding that actin filament and shortening that sarcomere, causing the muscle to contract. So again, the latent period goes up to the point of the calcium being released by the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Then during the contraction phase, this is when the troponin is pulling the tropomyosin away, and the myosin heads are attaching to the actin and sliding the thin filament toward the center of the sarcomere. And then the relaxation is when the ATP attaches to the myosin head, causing those myosin heads to let go of the actin. The calcium is reabsorbed by the sarcomere, and the muscle relaxes. Again, a twitch does not accomplish anything useful. Wave summation would be this part of the graph. If we do a second stimulus before the relaxation phase has ended, so before we have completely relaxed, we will get a second stronger contraction. Okay, so again, a second contraction where the tension is increased. So this one has a lower tension. We do another stimulus before relaxation has completed, and so it goes up higher, and we get a higher tension in the muscle. So basically, it's like adding twitches, and I think we talked about that one last week as well. I'm not sure if we got to incomplete tetanus. This part of the graph is incomplete tetanus. You can see we are still, stimulating. These little orange arrows are the stimulation, so stimulating this muscle fiber more frequently so that we are still, adding twitches, increasing that tension each time we do another stimulus before relaxation has completed until we reach a maximum tension. So at this point here, we have reached a maximum tension. Again, there is still relaxation involved. So again, just stimulating it more frequently than we were here. Again, look at the orange arrows. The last one, the complete tetanus, is where we are stimulating this muscle, the muscle fibers so frequently, so often, as you can see here, that we completely eliminate the relaxation phase. So again, you can see here it goes up and it doesn't come back down. So here it is still relaxing partially before we do another stimulation and contract it again. And we reach this peak tension. With complete tetanus, we are stimulating it so frequently that it never comes down. Relaxation is gone. There is no relaxation. And virtually all of the muscle contractions that we do to make our normal movements involve complete tetanus or this kind of stimulation of the fibers that are being stimulated. Now, in your muscle, not all the fibers are being stimulated all the time, but the ones that are being stimulated are doing this complete tetanus. They are contracting completely with no relaxation at all. Again, we like to look at a motor unit. How frequently we stimulate the muscle fiber does affect the amount of tension, but not as much as the number of fibers that we stimulate. The more fibers that we stimulate, the much more tension that we can get in a muscle. So in muscles, remember, neurons innervate and stimulate muscle fibers. Some neurons may branch out and innervate and stimulate only a few muscle fibers, while other neurons may branch out to hundreds of muscle fibers and innervate and stimulate hundreds of muscle fibers. And all of the muscle fibers that are controlled or stimulated by one neuron is called a motor unit. So again, some neurons controlling a single muscle fiber, that would be a very small motor unit. Other neurons controlling hundreds or thousands of muscle fibers, that would be a large motor unit. So we have small motor units and large motor units. And when we stimulate, when a neuron controls a few muscle fibers, that's a small motor unit. And when a neuron controls hundreds or thousands of muscle fibers, that's a large motor unit. And again, there are good things and bad things about small motor units and large motor units. This is because the size of the motor unit determines not only the amount of tension that we're going to get in the muscle, but also the amount of control or the amount of precise control that we have over that muscle. If we have a small motor unit, so what we're looking at here is a small motor unit where you have one neuron that stimulates a very few fibers, you are going to have not a lot of tension in that muscle, but you're going to have a lot of fine control. So in small muscles like those that control your fingers, those that control the movement of your eye, you have small muscles with small motor units so that you don't get a lot of tension in your fingers. You know, you can't lift up a 200-pound weight with your fingers. You can't produce a lot of tension or force with the muscles in your fingers. However, we do have very precise control so that we can pick up a needle with our fingers. We can precisely move our eyes with those small motor units and those small muscles that control the eye movements. On the other hand, we have large motor units. So this bullet is referring to a large motor unit. When you have a neuron that is stimulating hundreds or thousands of muscle fibers, this is going to be in a large muscle. This is called a large motor unit. And you're not going to get very precise control, but you are going to get a lot of tension. So for example, in your thigh, in your belly, you have large muscles with large motor units. You have a single neuron that is innervated hundreds or thousands of muscle fibers. So you can get a lot of tension. So your thigh muscle can generate a lot of tension, a lot of force to help hold your body up to let you run really fast. But you don't have precise control. You can't pick up a needle with your thigh because you have those large muscles with those large motor units. You don't have a lot of precise control. We also have something called recruitment. And this is just referring to, this is called the size principle. When you are using your muscle, the stimulus determines how many motor units are activated in that muscle, but it always happens that the smaller motor units in the muscle are activated first or stimulated first, and then gradually, as that stimulus tells that muscle we need more and more tension, more and more force, then larger, faster motor units will be activated. And so this causes the amount of tension in the muscle to rise steeply as you activate larger and more powerful motor units with more muscle fibers in them. So what we see is a steady rise in the tension as we activate small motor units first and then larger, faster motor units. We see that the peak tension that we can produce in a muscle is produced when all of the motor units in that muscle are being stimulated. So all of the muscle fibers in all of the motor units in that entire muscle are contracting, doing complete tetanus. However, if you are doing a very powerful contraction like that, that contraction can't last for very long. And so most of the useful movements that we make do not involve the complete tetanus of all the muscle fibers in all the motor units in the muscle, because that muscle would wear out very quickly. What we have to produce all of our useful movements are called sustained tetanic contractions. So what these are, you have your neurons that are activating the motor units in your muscle on a rotating basis, so that at any one time some motor units are resting while others are contracting, doing that complete tetanus. So you guys, I kind of compare this to a relay race. If you're running the mile relay, or maybe it's the 440, that's what it is. Okay, you have a baton, and the first person in that relay runs as fast as they can. They give it all they've got in the first leg, and then they pass that baton off. And when they pass that baton off, the person that just gave it all they had stops. They rest, they're done. And then the next person gives it all they've got. And then when they pass the baton off, they do the same thing. So this is kind of how your motor units in your muscle are working when you're doing most of the movements that you make every day. Some of the motor units are giving it all they got. They're doing complete tetanus, while others are sitting there doing nothing. And then the ones that are doing complete tetanus, when they get tired, they get to stop. And the ones that were doing nothing start doing complete tetanus. So it's kind of like they hand the baton off. Some motor units are working very hard doing that complete tetanus, while others are doing nothing. And then they rotate, so that the ones that were doing nothing now start doing complete tetanus, and the ones that were doing complete tetanus then get to rest. And this allows us to be able to produce some pretty powerful contractions, not at peak tension, but at pretty good tensions, but we can maintain it for longer periods of time because we always have some motor units that are doing complete tetanus while others are resting. This keeps it keeps it going. It keeps the muscle contracting for longer periods of time without fatiguing, is what it's called. Okay, we can also look at muscle tone. This guy has some pretty good muscle tone. He's not the cutest guy it ever was, but he does have some pretty good muscle tone, a lot better than I do, I can tell you that. Basically, what causes muscle tone, we define muscle tone as the resting tension in a muscle. What causes this is that in any muscle at any given time, there are always going to be a few motor units that are contracting. even when your muscle is, even when you're resting and relaxing, some of the motor units in that muscle are contracting. This kind of helps to keep your bones and ligaments and tendons and all that in the correct positions to avoid injury. It also helps to keep your tongue from falling back into your airway when you're sleeping. And if you have good muscle tone like this guy has, your muscles are going to be very firm and solid and well defined. If you have little muscle tone like I do, your muscles are going to be more limp. They're going to be more weak and flaccid. When you pass out, when you go unconscious, you lose all muscle tone, and this is the reason why we have to, when someone passes out, we have to check their airway and make sure it's open so that they can breathe. Because number one, you don't know why they passed out, when you have to check and make sure that they weren't choking or anything. But number two, when you pass out, muscle tone is lost, and so your tongue, muscle tone helps to keep your tongue out of your airway. So when you pass out, you lose that muscle tone, and so the tongue can actually fall back into the airway, block the airway, and the person can actually not breathe. So you have to do that forward jaw thrust to kind of pull their tongue out of their airway to make sure that they can breathe. Okay, another thing we can talk about with muscles are reflexes. A reflex is an automatic involuntary response to a stimulus. So for example, when you're sitting on the doctor's table and he takes a little rubber hammer and he hits right down there under your kneecap on your knee, and your leg, without you even thinking about it, just jumps. Okay, he's not testing your muscle or your bone. He's actually testing your nervous system, because you have little sensory structures, which are part of the nervous system, in your muscle called muscle spindles. These muscle spindles keep in constant contact with your brain about the position and length of the proteins in your muscle fibers and in your muscle. And if they become distorted, then this muscle spindle will detect that and will automatically, without you even thinking about it, automatically, involuntarily adjust that body part to try to reestablish the normal position, the normal length and position of that muscle, of that body part. So again, it is something that is involuntary. You don't have to think about it. Your brain just automatically does it when that muscle spindle is distorted. So when there's a muscle spindle right there in your knee, when the doctor hits your knee with that rubber hammer, it distorts that muscle spindle, and that tells your brain that that body part is out of its normal position and could be damaged, and your brain automatically tries to adjust it to bring it back to its normal position to prevent damage. So again, this is just one way that your nervous system helps to keep your bones and muscles and tendons from getting in a bad position, something that would cause them harm. We have a couple of different kinds of contractions that we can talk about. An isotonic contraction is when our muscles contract enough, they produce enough tension to overcome the resistance. So let's say that we are trying to pick up our book. Okay, our book is the resistance. It's the weight that we're trying to pick up. So if our, Kaden here, go outside in the hall and answer this, because I'm trying to make a video and I don't want to stop. Oh gosh. Anyway, where was I? Yeah. Sorry about that interruption. Anyway, when you are trying to pick up a book, the book is the resistance, the book is the weight that you're trying to lift. If your muscle can produce enough tension, enough force to overcome that resistance, then you can lift the book. So when you do an isotonic contraction, then your muscle is able to produce enough tension, enough force to move that resistance, to move that book. Your muscle will shorten and the book will move. So that is called an isotonic contraction. So anytime you're trying to pick up anything or move anything and it moves, you're doing an isotonic contraction. And don't worry about concentric and eccentric. And then the other type of contraction is an isometric contraction. This is when you are trying to lift something, but it's too heavy for you to lift, and so therefore the tension that your muscle is producing, the force that your muscle is producing, is not enough to overcome the resistance. It's not enough to move the object that you're trying to move. So let's say that you're trying to pick up a car, or you're trying to push the wall. Okay, you are definitely producing tension, you're producing force, your muscles are contracting, but that force is not enough to overcome that resistance. You don't move the wall, you don't move the car, and so therefore that would be considered an isometric contraction. Your postural muscles, the muscles, your anti-gravity muscles, those muscles are the kinds of muscles are doing these contractions that are holding your body upright against the force of gravity. Okay, now we're going to be looking at the different types of muscle fibers. Now on here, on this video, I can't show this video again because it probably is copyrighted and YouTube would flag me for copyright infringement if I show you this video. But this video, if you want to go watch it, again, it is on my PowerPoint that's posted on Google Classroom. Just find this slide and click on it. It will talk about 3 different types of muscle fibers. I think it's type 2A, type 2X, and maybe type 1 or something like that. But anyway, we don't call them 1, 2A, and 2X. We call them fast, slow, and intermediate. So our first type of muscle fiber are going to be our fast fibers. Most of your muscle fibers, like in your lower limbs, are going to be this type of muscle fiber. They are very large. They have lots of stored energy. They don't do a lot of aerobic respiration, so they don't have a lot of mitochondria. The reason they don't do a lot of aerobic respiration is because they don't have a very good blood supply, okay? They don't have a lot of blood, and without blood, you don't have a lot of oxygen. So rather than doing aerobic respiration, they use anaerobic respiration, which is without oxygen. And anaerobic respiration, is going to produce energy, but there's a problem with it. It produces lactic acid. Lactic acid causes your muscles to cramp up, and this is what we call muscle fatigue. So these types of fibers, these fast fibers, can contract really quickly and really hard, but not for very long. These can produce very powerful contractions, but not for a long period of time because they do the anaerobic respiration without oxygen because there's not enough blood supply. They are going to produce lactic acid, and so these muscle fibers are going to wear out. They're going to fatigue fairly quickly. So they are going to be used for brief, powerful movements. And you guys, these kinds of fibers are what you find, for example, you find a lot of them in our lower limbs. You also find them in the breast of a chicken. This is the reason why a chicken breast is white meat, because the fibers are these fast fibers. They're white because, again, there's not a lot of blood associated with them. Okay, so that's what causes them to be white. And again, they're used for brief, powerful contractions because there's not a lot of blood. There's not a lot of oxygen, so they do anaerobic respiration. This results in, a very powerful contraction, but not for a long period of time because lactic acid builds up, which causes cramping. And this is called muscle fatigue, so they fatigue fairly quickly. And if you think about a chicken, what does it use its breast and wing for? It doesn't fly all the time. It uses its breast and wing to fly away from predators. So brief, powerful contractions, it flies long enough to get away from a predator, and then it's done. They don't use their breast and wing a lot except for brief, powerful contractions. So that's the reason why you have these fast fibers and without a lot of blood supply, and this is what causes the chicken breast and wing to be white, because the fast fibers are white. Where are the others? Oh, yes. And I want to show you what happens when a muscle fatigues. When a muscle really fatigues, when a muscle is doing anaerobic respiration without oxygen, lactic acid is being produced, builds up in the muscle, causes cramping, and ends up in muscle fatigue. We're going to watch a video, and this video we can watch that shows true muscle fatigue. And this is really kind of funny.
Hi, this is Mr. Grove, and today I want to talk a little bit about your muscles and exercise. And the first thing I kind of want to look at is what happens when you've pushed your muscles to the limit. They can't possibly contract anymore. Let's take a look at this video real quick, and I think you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. Athletes, take your hands. What you're looking at is a marathon down in Australia, and we're going to look at a gentleman who was actually disqualified at first. But I believe he was the winner here, coming in 2 hours and 26 minutes. The muscle fatigue shown right there. Keep in mind, these guys are running 26 plus miles. So coming in sub 3 hours. I like this guy carrying 2 babies.
This guy right here.
Been running for 26 months. Look at the score guy. Here's the guy we're looking at. Muscles are going to stop working right now. Another view of it. Let's see when the top of the picture around 3:30. It's about to go down. Leg muscles are done. Keep in mind, this tour guy's done 26 miles. He's been out running 3.5 hours in the official disqualified. My understanding is there's an outcry, and he got that. Impressive. But check this out. There's that characteristic gait of a muscle that wants to stop working. You're looking at a marathon at an Ironman competition. So these poor ladies who are trying to finish their 26 miles still have, I should have looked it up, 112 miles on a bicycle next. Well, let's keep watching. Funny as heck, but you got to admire that determination. All right,
Okay, so anyway, you can see there, when a muscle truly fatigues, you're not using it anymore. When it has built up enough lactic acid that it just can't function anymore, I mean, it actually hurts, that muscle will not contract anymore. And that is what we call true muscle fatigue. Now, if you've ever done a big workout and the next day you're sore, okay, you probably had a little bit of muscle fatigue. Your muscles produce some lactic acid during that heavy exercise, and that's what causes the soreness the next day. But true muscle fatigue is what you just saw in those couple of videos. Okay, the next type of muscle fiber that we're going to talk about are slow muscle fibers. These are going to be smaller and they are going to be slower than fast fibers. These have lots of stored energy. They don't have a lot of stored energy. Your fast fibers have a lot of stored energy in the form of glycogen. That energy is just sitting there waiting for them to be used so they can do those brief, powerful contractions. Your slow fibers are going to contract more slowly, they're going to take longer, and they're going to produce less powerful contractions. So therefore, they don't have a lot of stored energy, rather they have lots of mitochondria, because mitochondria are continuously producing energy. Because they're contracting slower, they don't need a lot of energy right up front. They're contracting slower, they need that continuous supply of energy. Again, they have lots of mitochondria, so they are doing lots of aerobic respiration. They are able to do lots of aerobic respiration because they have lots of mitochondria, and also because they have a better blood supply, which provides the oxygen that they need, so that they are doing aerobic respiration using these mitochondria and the oxygen that is in the blood from that good blood supply that they have. And so because they have a lot of blood, a lot of capillaries, a lot of blood vessels, a good blood supply, these are red. And this is what causes the dark meat in a chicken, like the legs and the thighs are going to be dark meat. Again, these are used for less powerful contractions for longer periods of time because they're doing aerobic respiration. They're not producing that lactic acid. They're not going to fatigue as quickly. And if you think about a chicken, what does it use its legs and thighs for? Well, it uses them all the time for walking around. And so, just kind of steady movement, not very powerful contractions for longer periods of time. That's what you're going to get with slow fibers. So chicken legs and thighs have lots of these slower fibers. And so that's why they're dark meat, because there's more blood vessels and more blood, a better blood supply associated with these fibers. In our upper limbs, we have more slow fibers, because we kind of just consistently use our muscles in our arms, you know, for less powerful contractions for longer periods of time. And then the third type of fiber, sorry, I don't know what's going on with this slide here. Sorry about that. My slide is wanting to mess up today. I guess a lot of us are using the internet. It's messing everything up, so this is taking longer than what I wanted it to, so I apologize for that. Let me see here. Here we go. The intermediate fibers. Intermediate fibers are going to kind of have properties of both fast and slow fibers. They are going to look a lot more like fast fibers, but they are going to have a better blood supply than fast fibers. So they're going to be able to contract more like, or they're going to be able to contract for longer periods of time more like your slow fibers. And so they are going to be able to produce more tension than slow fibers, but not fatigue as quickly as fast fibers. So they kind of have properties of both. They have the kind of the good of both of them. They don't fatigue as quickly, but they can produce more powerful contractions than slow fibers can. And so you can actually, there's a little bit of debate about this as to whether you are causing your fast fibers to become intermediate with conditioning and training, or if maybe you are just enlarging your fast fibers more and causing them to become more fatigue resistant. There's a little bit of debate on exactly what's happening there, because it's believed that genetically you have, you know, a ratio of fast to slow and intermediate, that you have ratio of those, and that, you know, just maybe you're enlarging the intermediate fibers more when you are doing the physical conditioning, rather than causing fast fibers to become intermediate. Maybe you're just enlarging and training those fast fibers more, and so they become they are going to be the more dominant ones because they get bigger with the physical conditioning and training that you're doing. Okay, we also want to look at hypertrophy and atrophy. Hypertrophy is just referring to the enlargement of the muscle. What causes the enlargement of the muscle? Well, it is repeated exhaustive stimulation. And exercise provides this repeated exhaustive stimulation. So the more you exercise, your muscles will get bigger. Your muscle fibers will get bigger. They'll develop more mitochondria, more myofibrils, and they'll get bigger. And this causes your muscle to get bigger. Also, men have a higher muscle mass than women do, and this is because of the male hormone testosterone. Testosterone provides the same repeated exhaustive stimulation that exercise provides. And so testosterone causes males, because it's repeatedly stimulating their muscles, this chemical, this hormone, males tend to have a higher muscle mass than females do. And also, this is why steroids work. Steroids contain hormones like testosterone that provide this repeated stimulation that causes the muscles to enlarge even without exercise. Usually, people that do take those hormones, in addition to those hormones which repeatedly stimulate their muscle, they also are exercising, which is even more stimulation of the muscle, and so that's what causes their muscles to get really big. However, these hormones, these steroids, are not good to take because they do have side effects. They can cause cancer as well as sterility, also aggressive behavior, which is not good. On the other end of the spectrum, we have atrophy. This goes along just like we talked about with bone. If you don't use it, you lose it. So if you don't stimulate, if you don't use your muscle, you don't exercise it, you don't stimulate it on a regular basis, then it gets smaller. You lose muscle tone, you lose muscle mass, and it causes the muscle to become smaller and weaker. And this is called muscle atrophy. People who are bedridden, people who are in wheelchairs, maybe paraplegics, they end up with atrophy. If you've ever noticed someone who's in a wheelchair who is like maybe paralyzed from the waist down, their lower body is going to look a lot like this. Their legs are very atrophied. The muscle and bone in their legs is wasting away because they're not using it. They can't stimulate it because the connection between their brain and that part of their body is gone, and so the brain can't stimulate those muscles to contract. And so they atrophy, they get smaller and weaker. But if they use a wheelchair a lot and it's actually one that they push rather than the electric ones, then you notice their upper body gets a lot bigger. So it actually goes through hypertrophy because they're using those, they're exercising those muscles, stimulating them, using them so much more, they actually get larger. So the upper body gets really big and the lower body gets very small due to atrophy. Atrophy in the short term is reversible. So, for example, if you're in a cast for 4 to 6 weeks, you take your arm out of the cast, compare it to the one that wasn't in a cast, and you can see that it's smaller. Those muscles have atrophied. However, with regular use, that arm comes back to normal size, looks just like the other one, and you can't even tell that that it had wasted away some. But in the long term, muscle atrophy becomes permanent. The muscle cells can actually die, and when they die, there's no getting them back. And so atrophy can become permanent if it gets too severe. Okay, we have lots of muscle diseases and disorders we can talk about. The first one is muscular dystrophy. This is actually a sex-linked recessive trait, meaning that it's usually passed. Women are carriers and mothers pass it to their sons, and a lot of times it will be males that have this. Basically, they have muscle weakness in their legs, which then spreads to their shoulders and other parts of the body. And they usually occur, they usually die in their early 20s due to weakness of their diaphragm, which is your major breathing muscle, as well as the cardiac muscle in your heart also gets weak. And that's usually what causes them to pass away. Cerebral palsy, again, the muscular dystrophy is genetic. Cerebral palsy is not really believed to be genetic. It is present at birth, but they think it is due to complications during birth that deprive the motor center of the brain of oxygen, so damaging it, causing the muscles to not be able to be controlled like you normally would be able to control them. So not genetic, but they think it's more caused by complications during birth, depriving the motor center of the brain of oxygen, which affects the conscious control of the muscle. You guys have heard of polio. It's actually called poliomyelitis. It is a viral infection that used to affect a lot of people in this country and still affects people in other countries. We do have a vaccine that all of our citizens in the U.S. are given. It was developed by a man named Jonas Salk. It does affect motor neurons that control the skeletal muscles. So you can see here the motor neuron controlling the skeletal muscle. Obviously, this muscle is not in its correct position, which could end up causing damage to the muscle. But again, that's because the muscle spindle, and the motor neurons that control the skeletal muscle have been damaged by the polio virus. And so this little girl does not hold her leg in what we would call a normal position because she can't, because her nervous system has been damaged. The motor neurons have been damaged. The muscle spindles have probably been damaged. So they're not communicating with the brain about the position of her leg, and so her leg is not held in the correct position. Then we have some just general terms. Myalgia is just referring to muscle pain. Is muscle, algia is pain. So again, this pain can be due to many different things. It can be due to an autoimmune disease that someone may have. It can be due to straining the muscle, stretching it too far, tearing the muscle fibers. So any kind of muscle pain is myalgia. Myositis is inflammation of the muscle. Again, myo is muscle, itis is inflammation. So again, this is just a general term to inflammation of the muscle. It can be caused by many different things, diseases and injuries. What we call a Charlie horse is actually just a cramp, a painful involuntary muscle spasm. A Charlie horse is actually inflammation of the muscle tissue and the tendons associated with the muscle due to injury. So if you injure your muscle, you have inflammation of the muscle as well as the connective tissues associated with that muscle, tearing and bruising, then that is what you call a Charlie horse. Okay, so I'm going to be posting, or I have posted a Google form with some questions for you to answer over this PowerPoint. I will post another short PowerPoint where I will go over things that you need to know for the exam that you'll be having on Thursday. And so please let me know if you have any questions. Don't forget to answer those questions on that Google assignment. And remember, if you want your binder, it is here at the high school. You need to get here and pick that up by 2 p.m. on Tuesday. Hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.